now.
Shall we begin? Yes. Well, hello everyone. It's time to introduce Rubén Chacón, who is a professor at the Universidad Nacional de Educación a Distancia in Madrid, where he teaches undergraduate courses in English as a foreign language and social linguistics, and graduate seminars in bilingualism and language policy. He holds a PhD in applied English linguistics and has taught at various Spanish universities. He is editor of the Spanish journal entitled Studies in Applied English Linguistics, and his areas of interest are vocabulary teaching and learning, materials design, bilingual education, and learner autonomy. He has co-edited some books, such as H in L2 Acquisition and Teaching in 2006, Insights into Vocabulary Teaching and Learning in 2010, The Impact of Effective Variables in L2 Teaching and Learning in 2010, and Bilingual and Multilingual Education in the 21st Century, Building on Experience in 2013. And Rubén Chacón has been recently appointed Dean of the Faculty of Philology, and we all want to thank you for joining us. It's a great pleasure, and whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes? Well, first of all, I would like to thank the English department at the Complutense and the coordinator of the program, the PhD program, for inviting me to be here today to give this talk, to present my research. I must say that to me it's really a milestone to be here at the Complutense presenting my research. So thank you very much, Paloma, and all the organizers for this kind of invitation. The title of my talk is New Horizons, Technological Resources for Second Language Development. This thing of New Horizons looks like very, I don't know, like very special thing, but I do think that the work we are doing at the UNED right now really presents a new perspective of things that, but of course I want you to tell me and to let me know what you think. What I'm doing today is to present some of the research projects that I have been working on for the last 15 years. You will see that this is not my work alone, so this is the work of a team of researchers where we work together hand in hand, linguists and also computer scientists. I can tell now that linguists and computer scientists, we speak different languages. It's really difficult to get to know what the other wants, but I think we have reached a point where we sort of can work together. The whole idea of my presentation today is to provide some examples, some proof of concept that you can do things your own. I mean, 20 years ago, I knew nothing about new technologies applied to language teaching. In this time, I have learned a few things. And I do think that there are job opportunities for anyone wanting to work on this field of research. And there are also research opportunities for students wanting to find some sort of field of research. I also need to talk about my teaching context. As you know, I work for the UNED, which is the equivalent of the Spanish, it's the equivalent of the British Open University. So our everyday situation is that we have to deal with hundreds of students. We have lots of students. It's not uncommon to have a course with 250, 300 students. Of course, we count on the help of tutors in associate centers all over Spain. Now they're more like virtual tutors. But anyway, we need to sort of provide students with resources, good resources that help them learn at their own pace, when they have the time, and in any possible situation. So the thing is that I would say that we are an example of teaching based on research. We do some research and we apply that into our everyday situation. You can also see that in a different way. We are somehow finding a solution for a problem, because we need to deal with this lots of students, so we try to work on that. So I think that's enough for an introduction. The structure of this talk, I will just contextualize a little bit. Then I will talk about the skill of writing, free writing, some resources that we have developed for that. Also, we have developed some resources for speaking. Actually, there is a lot about learning languages on the web, freely available. You can find plenty of things. But one of the problems that we tend to find is that you find is very often closed set of activities, meaning lots of multiple choice, lots of fill in the blanks. But what about creativity? What about free writing? And what about speaking, which is also one of the things that we have to deal with at UNED, because we may have students living here in Madrid, but also students living in a remote place in Valencia, for example. So, although the question of input is no longer an issue, because nowadays we have the internet and we all have access to real input. But anyway, we took the long way. Instead of going to closed activities, we just wanted to concentrate on a real challenge, which is free writing and speaking. I will also talk very briefly about Moocs, because we had a very nice experience about Moocs. Moocs are massive online open courses. These, you probably know about them. We have offered some courses that are not part of university degrees, but that they are just for anyone wanting to learn languages. And then I will go on with some concluding remarks. So, as I said before, distance learning is not uncommon now. Our lives have changed a lot. We do things that we couldn't do a few years ago. For example, no one here probably goes to a travel agent to buy a plane ticket or to book a hotel. We do that ourselves. So we are somehow become self-confident, and we have become literate enough in the use of technology to do that type of things. So distance learning is just the same thing. As you know, that 40 years ago there was just one distance university in Spain. Nowadays we have plenty of them, and we have plenty of programs within conventional meaning just universities, presenciales, like the one that we have here. But you have programs online. So this has become just commonplace. So as I said, we have to deal with large number of students, and this also requires a high degree of learner autonomy. Students really need to be conscious of what they can do. They really need to dedicate time and things. But let's assume that we are dealing with a selected group of students that really want to learn languages. With regards to ICT, information and communication technologies, just mention that there are new demands in the market. We have all our lives have changed a lot. Now with WhatsApp, a few years ago, how could we live without WhatsApp? Or how could we live without email 10 years ago? So. And there's one more thing about developing teaching materials, online teaching materials, which is the one that I would like to point out as sustainability. Nowadays, as I said, it's no longer an issue to have access to good input through the internet, but having these resources, you don't need to travel, you can learn anywhere, you don't need to, so it's also good for the planet, I like to think. So, as I said, we have concentrated on productive skills that, like writing and speaking. And one final thing in this contextualization is that of why we learn the language. We learn the language both in EMI and CLIL, probably as a lingua franca. Here I am, I'm not a native speaker of the language. There are some native speakers of the language here, of English, but mostly we just use the language to communicate with other speakers. So what do we want? What's the aim? What should be the aim of CLIL, for example, just to use the language functionally as a lingua franca? Let's move into writing. You know that writing is a difficult skill to learn, both in the first language and even more in the second language. What we noticed a few years ago is that there are few activities to develop students' writing skills in textbooks. Why? Why is that? This one simple reason. If me as a teacher, as a secondary school teacher, for example, I ask my students to write a composition, a 300 composition, it takes them 15 minutes and then it takes me hours to correct them. So, you know, this is something that students learning the language should write abundantly all the time, but then, you know, there is no time for the teacher to correct all that. So if you as a new teacher do that once, you just do that like once a month maybe, but not all the time. There's one other thing, which is that the amount of feedback that teachers can provide is limited. When I was at university, I used to take German classes, and my German teacher did something that I really hated, which was when we handed in an essay, instead of correcting it, she just underlined where there was a mistake. Then you got it back, and then you had to rewrite it and hand it in again. And that was a pain. When you do your assignment, you just want to hand it in and forget about it. And then this second time, when the teacher just wrote all the feedback, what I did as a student was just to put it in my folder and never again, and just forgot about it. So this is something that we want to change with these tools. Why? You don't want to go back to your writing, but at the time of writing, when this cognitive window is open and you're processing your writing, is the time to get feedback and to get information that you can use to improve your writing. Yes, so here is the solution. It's not that easy, but that's of grammar checkers, which is software that can help you to rewrite or to improve your writing. We all use grammar checkers. When you type something in a Word document, you get some feedback that tells you that something is wrong and things. It's very useful, for example, in spelling. Not so useful with regards to grammar. And for years, this has been developed. There have been like lots of attempts to develop grammar checkers. But mainly they have been designed for native speakers of the language, not for language learners. What does a language learner need? A language learner needs feedback, comprehensible feedback that they can somehow process and improve their writing. The grammar checkers that are currently available, like Microsoft Grammar Checker, they are based on parsers. This is a computer scientist thing. I'll let you know in a minute, but they fail to detect some errors. Sometimes when you're typing, they provide some feedback that you know, but you as a native speaker, you say, okay, I know this is wrong, and you know more than the grammar checker. Some other times they suggest mistakes that in fact there aren't. Okay, this is also very common with accents, with tildes in Spanish. And some other times they provide ambiguous or misleading advice. So we took the challenge, this research team, of developing a grammar checker for students of English, people wanted to learn the language. And then in the meantime, later on, we also developed Correct Me, which is still a prototype, and that's for Spanish, even though it has a name in English, but it's for Spanish. The idea was to have materials which would help enable students to work independently of a teacher, so that students could self-correct their own free-form written production. The underlying principles were that self-correction is the best correction, and that mistakes are learning opportunities. One thing is that we are dealing here with adults, but I must say that this tool can be used by anyone. I mean, it adapts to any level. It has a big database at the back, but if you don't make use of that, it doesn't just disturb you at all. This tool has a spelling filter because you cannot deal with everything at the same time. So we deal with spelling first, then we deal with with grammar checking, using contrasting the writing, the free writing, with the BNC, the British National Corpus. Okay, so here we start to talk about, to speak linguistic things. So there's lots of linguistics going on in here. First, we do linguistics in corpus, learner corpora, and we also use like a normative corpus, which is the one that, it's like our native speaker, the one we ask, is this right or not? That's our BNC. We also deal with incorrect sequences, which is pairs of words that do not match, that are wrong. And we also have additional filters like problem words. Problem words, for example, refers to false frames. There is no way that the machine can know if if the use of a false frame is right or wrong. It's only the one who's writing who knows. But he can be provided with some feedback to think about it. Collocations, of course, this is also connected with incorrect sequences, and this is also a very common mistake that non-native speakers tend to make. Let me show you an example with spelling. If you use this tool, you can just write on it, or you can just cut and paste from a Word document. The good thing, the ideal thing is to deactivate the spell checking facility, because what we want is for students to make use of, to process this feedback. So if a student, for example, writes different with one F, I don't want Microsoft Word just to change it in no time so that I cannot notice. I do want the student just to think about it and process that. Let me show you an example that is a real example. We went to the museum and saw lots of different things. Afterwards, we went to home. This is an example taken from students' writing. This is the appearance. This is what grammatical looks like. It's really simple. We try not to bother the student with too much information or too many colors or anything. So when you type in this sentence, the one that I just read, you see that different colors come up. For example, different. And if you just click on different, this information comes to you. Things like, you wrote different. The correct spelling is different with double F. When a word starts with diff, the next letter is also F. Just like in difficult, difficulty, difference, diffuse. Okay, so this is just an example of the type of feedback you get for spelling. Beforehand, I was talking about parsing. One thing is that this is one of the mismatches between computer scientists and linguists. Computer scientists want to use the whole language. They want to tag the language to provide labels. For example, this is a verb, this is an adjective, and then to provide some grammar and generalize that. But that's precisely the problem that's why Microsoft Word doesn't really work sometimes. So what's our approach? The linguist approach is just to concentrate on real mistakes. There's one thing, and it is that students tend to make the same type of mistakes. If you have ever corrected, ask your students to write a composition, and you correct it later on, all of them make the same mistakes because of the level, because of their first language, because of the second language they are learning. So it's very productive if you identify one mistake, just deal with it, process it, and put it into this grammar checking tool. So this is the approach we follow as linguists. And of course, no one wants to go in a different direction to Microsoft, but we have done that. Because if we went in the same direction, they would always be ahead of us, so there's no... the thing is that dealing with grammar, as I said, this tool contrasts your writing with the writing with this normative corpus, and then provides you like a color telling you how likely or unlikely that's to happen. Sorry, I forgot to mention, I'm going back. Here we have museum. a museum with double S. And this is, of course, we cannot have this feedback for every single word. So, as I said, we just try to find words that are productive, that are very common, and sometimes even this rule is not always easy to find, the one that's with a double F. So sometimes we have solutions for that, and some other times we have a big thinking tank of problems that need to be solved. And one more thing, what I'm presenting today is a tool that is being used. It's useful, but this is like writing a dictionary. You never end. You can spend your whole life, and there will always be more and more mistakes. So we are aware of that. Museum, for example, is a word that is not, we haven't found a solution for this, or maybe we haven't found an example beforehand, and we have processed that. So, but the program, the software, knows that this is not in its database, in its dictionary, so it just tells you that this is something strange. So when you click on it, you just go to word reference, and then you can sort of work with that a little longer. So I'm going back where I was before. Let's think that students have already corrected this and that, and then we have to home. And to me, because what you've seen so far is quite straightforward, but yeah, I think that now things start to become more interesting. Because to home, this is contrasted against this BNC, and students are just given a number, a threshold, which is 0.27, which apparently means nothing. But this means students also have access to this information. What we do here is to provide the words that tend to, in our corpus that are usually come before and usually come after that word. So if a student that has written to home sees this at home, this frequency, threshold, forget about the threshold now. I'll explain it later. The home, this home, but there is no to home. So this is something suspicious. So an informed student will probably change at home to home for one of these options. The same with words coming after. Again, the student sees what's more likely to happen and what's less. And this is an endless list, as you can imagine. But this is so far that this is enough. The same with to home. Students here can see that to home doesn't appear. This may look like very time-consuming, but once you have trained your eye, and once you have done this a couple of times, we have also conducted some research with real students because we wanted to have some feedback, and I will also talk about this later on. So, very briefly, I will show you where this threshold comes from, because in the end, this is what the student has. The student sees. The pair to home appears 272 times in the corpus. So, I thought that was wrong. To home, no, that's wrong. But it appears in the corpus. I don't know why. There are probably contexts where this is possible. Or maybe there are mistakes, because corpora are sometimes wrong. The word to appears this many times. The word home appears this many times. So, if instead of having grammatical rules, words just appear at random, we would expect, this is a mathematical thing, a statistical thing, we would expect this pair to occur 1,011 times, but it only appears 272, as you saw. So this gives us a threshold of 0.27, which is rather low. So this number just gives, it cannot tell the student this is right or this is wrong, but this gives information about the probability that there is a mistake there. Anything that is below 1 is probably wrong. Anything that is above 1 is probably right. If I go back, you'll see that the pair at home has a threshold of 30. I was saying that just having 1 is more or less all right. So this is the type of information that our students get when they're writing. Let's see what grammar checker cannot do. So we've seen that it can deal with spelling mistakes. It can provide rather like precise feedback at the word level. It can also provide specific feedback and reliable, 100% reliable at the two-word level, but we still need to look into longer sentences, like or collocations, like in the other hand, people whose just like in the other hand. So we still need to go to another level. We still need to deal with more semantic errors in words that we label as problem words in the case of false friends. And as I said, this is work in progress, but it's already useful and it's been used by our students. But what I wanted to show you is that this is the result of corpus linguistic analysis. We are dealing with learner corpora because we need to use learner corpora to identify errors, to find mistakes that we will later on process and put into this program. We also use a normative corpus, in this case is the British National Corpus, and we also make use of contrastive analysis, error analysis, just to process all this information. Okay. So what we have at the moment is a freely available tool, so this is free, anyone can use it. We have funded this project with two projects of the national program for research. I will provide you with the link now. One of the important things is that a number of TFM, Trabajos Fin de Master, have been developed, analyzing these different aspects of this. So that's why I said that there are research opportunities here. Some students, for example, analyze spelling or analyze just one type of collocation or things like that. So it's very useful for them, and it's also useful for the project. And we also have had some PhD theses. I understand, so far you probably know that I understand applied linguistics as something important for social development. I do think that what I do is applied linguistics, and I want it to be as applied as possible. So this is a way of contributing to social development, I would say. One more important thing is that we have developed this in Spain, and we should just start thinking in a different way. The market, the ELT market, has been dominated by English-speaking countries for years, and I think that now there's a chance of doing new things because of technology. Actually, this program, we didn't win, but we were nominated for the Eltons, which is like the Oscars of it's the British Council, I think, and Cambridge University Press. So it's a very important thing, and we were so happy to be invited to London, even if we didn't get the prize. That was our prize, actually. So as I mentioned, this implies a decentralization of the language teaching market, and this is something that we did, but any of you can do. I mean, I have also developed myself other teaching materials using Quizlet or using freely available tools, so that we need to stop thinking that everything needs to come from publishing houses or universities or anything like that. We also wanted to check, okay, this may look like a very nice idea, but we wanted to test it with real students and see how effective this is. So we took a sample, a corpus of 12,000 words written by 68 of our students, and I will just show you this final results. Having 257,000 entries in the database, this is a lots of work. But one thing that we do is that once you have identified that different is a mistake, you just need to look for the top the top words in English that are the most frequent words in English that have this sequence of different. So you put all of them in the database. So it doesn't mean that we have handwritten 257,000 entries. But once you have identified different, you know that it's going to be the same for difficult and many other examples. Am I making sense? Yeah? Okay. So first, we using this database, this amount of errors in our database, we found that almost 30% of the mistakes could be identified, could be corrected. And having increased that amount of entries, that moved into almost 40%. This may not look very impressive, but it's actually interesting for teachers to have their compositions, students' composition with 40% less errors, which is actually a lot. We are now way ahead of, way ahead of this. So we are still working on that. So what we're building is not something that is that can correct all mistakes. Teachers will not be substituted at all, but this means a lot of help for teachers and for students, because as I said at the very beginning, while their cognitive window is open, while they are writing their essays, they can get this feedback. This material is freely available. This is I'm sorry if it's a link too long, but if you Google UNED OTRI Recursos Inglés, you can easily find it. Okay. And of course, any feedback is welcome. It's as I said, this is work in progress. It's being used by our students at the moment at the UNED, but we're still working on that. Can I move on? I'm seeing, yeah? Okay. Let's move on into speaking. How do we solve this problem with speaking and listening? Listening is it could be not easy, but manageable, because you can just listen some recording and then multiple choice or something like that. But what about production? We had this EU-funded project called Fluency. This is not a typo. This is the name. The project was like a capital C and without a Y or whatever. This was developed by UNED, DIT, which is Dublin Institute of Technology, and Cambridge University Press. Here we dealt with corpus linguistics again, materials design, and speech processing. DIT is what they contributed with was they have a slow down technology, which means that you can slow down a recording without distorting it. Okay. So the idea is that we know that people, when they speak English fluently, they do not construct the meaning at the word level, but you just construct chunks of words. So there are chunks of words like, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? If you see that at the end of the day, so meaning is not constructed like at the word level, but with whole sets of words. So we wanted to follow a scientific approach, and the first thing we did was to find the most common chunks of words used by native speakers, in this case, British-speaking speakers. Yeah, this is a way of sounding natural, if a non-native speaker uses these phrases, we notice that you could sound more natural and improve your fluency. So what we did was to use spoken corpora to identify these sentences. We had the list of sentences. Sorry, I don't mean sentences, I mean chunks of words. And then we developed some teaching materials dealing with this. The assumptions was that 60% of spontaneous L1 dialogue is composed of formulaic language. As I said, British National Corpus and also CanCode Corpus, the spoken version or part of this corpora, were used to identify these 200 most frequent phrases, and then we prepare these teaching materials we try to provide very natural settings for the teaching materials. So we use the slowdown facility provided by DIT, and so that students can identify the intonation patterns and then produce them, okay? So recordings were slowed down up to 40%, 60%, and 80%, so that students could notice that. This is this has been published at UNED. This is not free, it costs €3. Sorry. The thing is that this is online, absolutely, you'll see, I'll show you how it works in a minute. Keeping this online costs money, so that was the only solution to have this, to keep this working. So again, if you go to Tienda de Libro Electrónico or whatever, so this is a subscription of €3.3. Let me show you, let me show you an example of how it works. Yep. Well, we have 20 dialogues. Let's take 3. There is an introduction. There are explanations and some videos and things, but I don't think it's worth now just to spend too much time on that. So I'll show you, for example, in dialogue 3, the chunk as a matter of fact. Okay, if I say as a matter of fact, this may be difficult to process. So what we do here, you will listen to that in a second. You will listen to it at different speeds. This has been extracted from the dialogue, okay? And then here you have the chance of recording it and listening to that, your own voice. So you can contrast one thing with the other. So let's see, because I was told to take care of sound here.
As a matter of fact, food as we know it will soon be redundant.
100%.
As a matter of fact, food is...
Just notice, as a matter of fact, this is easy for us, but maybe not for lower level students.
Know it will soon be redundant. As a matter of fact, food as we know it will soon be redundant.
40%.
As a matter of fact, food as we know it will soon be redundant.
You have probably noticed that the one who recorded this has a Hiberno English accent, and she's from Ireland, and we used to make jokes with this, that having a pint was the same effect of this. Right. It does? 60%.
Will soon be redundant.
80%.
Food as we know it will soon be redundant.
So now, if a student just records that at different speeds, he can. This is what I will call a focus on form, because you just focus on that specific aspect that you want to improve. So basically, this is it. This is sounds good. There are plenty of examples, but I think this was just enough. Going back to the presentation. Mm-hmm. Yes. No. So that sounds good. So far we have covered writing, free writing, essay writing, and speaking. And this has been just published. I mean, that was published, this sounds good, in last November. So it's a very recent thing. It took us years, I must tell. And then we move on into another experience we have had with technologies, with the development of second language teaching materials, and that's of Moocs. As I mentioned before, these are called massive online open courses. UNED, is a national-wide university, and it also has a social perspective. We try to, apart from our teaching degrees, we try to get to anyone who's interested in getting something from the university. So we just move into this. So the assumptions in this case was that classroom is not the only or the most convenient context for second language learning and development. Moocs are very recent. We are now starting to lose that initial track that we had with Moocs. Now they are starting to be questioned. But I must say that our Moocs are very popular at the moment. They use audiovisual teaching contents. They are totally online. As I said, they have known academic contents for the they are in non-academic context. They are free, and they are taught for a huge number of students. So we designed this. Empieza con el inglés, aprende las 1000 palabras más usadas y sus posibilidades comunicativas. Basically, this is beginner English. So we designed this 24 hours course. This is offered at the moment twice a year. It's free again. Next edition starts in March. And the idea is just that anyone who wants to learn English can start just with the most frequent words. What we found was that instead of having like absolute beginners, we found that there were plenty of false beginners who wanted to take the course, which means that people who had taken English at high school or who hadn't spoken any English for years, they just wanted to sort of somehow catch up. And the other one that it's also, this one is on its 12th edition. And I must tell that we have had like thousands of students, really thousands of them. The other one, starting to write English with no mistakes, level B1. It's again offered like twice a year. It has a workload of 24 hours. It's meant for students to help students to self-correct their own mistakes. This one is on its 7th edition and will start also in March. So the idea is that language learners can benefit from free access, quality language learning resources, that they can learn languages collaboratively at their own pace. This is very, very interesting. We have even conducted some research in the way that students interact. Now I'm talking to students, but I'm talking about people they are not university students, they are just people from anywhere in the world. I'll show you some data in a minute. These courses also rely on crowdsourcing, which means that students help each other with the English. Okay, I'll show you a sample of who takes these courses, because that was something that we really wanted to know. For example, on its 10th edition, we had like 17,000 people who signed for it. Only 8,000 really finished the course. This is also common in Moocs. But when I say only, you can imagine that, having 8,000 people just working together means that you've got to be very careful when you design your course, because otherwise you will be in trouble. I must say that I'm somehow called the curator of the course. I'm not taking care of the course, so there is a facilitator who's in touch with the students. But whenever there is a problem, or not a problem, but maybe some activity that doesn't match, or something, there's some question, that it's the curator who needs to deal with that. It's interesting to know that 87% were aged between 23 and 58, 41% were male, 56% were female. And who took these courses? Who took specifically this one? Mainly people from Spain, also from the English-speaking countries like Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, but also people from Japan, the Philippines, and Poland. I don't know why, but they just joined the course. This is one of the wonderful things about Moocs. I mean, you've got to be careful when you design it so that there are no problems, but then they are offered freely. So you can either die because no one wants them, or you can just die of success. So the idea is that if something is good, offered by any university in New Zealand, people will just join it because they will need to be good. So this is offered globally and for free. So with regard to the level of education, this was also revealing. To me, the most revealing figure was that of 43, or in total, it's like 54% of people having completed a degree. So it's not just for people who do not have like some training in languages or whatever. So really people who had completed higher education or postgraduate studies used these Moocs. Our pedagogical approach was to encourage explicit learning, because in this short period of time there was no time for trying to infer things or whatever. So we made use of the first language. Explanations are made in the first language. We also make use of existing knowledge. For example, we use contrastive linguistics to show students that maybe there are words in the first language that are very similar to the ones in the second language, and we try them to find some rules that will help them to deal with that. We also take advantage of pre-existing cognitive abilities, and of course we take advantage of similarities across languages. With regards to satisfaction, this is a more very detailed table, but in general, the green part means that students thought that they had learned the vocabulary that was provided, and that they had developed the strategies that were taught. Because one of the objectives was for them to be able to go on learning afterwards. It was not just teaching 1,000 words, but providing students with strategies to go on learning later on. Moocs have a big potential for self-directed language learning. They allow spoken and written interaction with same level students. They also favor cooperative learning. They adapt to learner needs, and they also their own pace, because students can work like when they can, and they are not forced to be there in front of the computer at specific time. It's also less stressful than a classroom context, because they are not face to face to the teacher or anyone. This also encourages learner autonomy. One interesting thing is that students start to share things. They start to share resources, and this was also very revealing. How students are, but I call them students, but they are actually not university students. They are just people. And then these Moocs have also evolved into what they call Noocs, which are shorter. But that's not. So I would like to finish just by mentioning that digital resources for distance learning and traditional learning, can be used in both contexts. So these resources are useful both at the UNED as a distance learning university, but they can also be used as a complement for any other classroom. Also an important part of this is flexibility in learning. Students can use these teaching materials anytime at different levels of proficiency, and they can also focus that on their personal interests. For example, in the case of writing, they can write on anything they like. If they like tennis, they can write about tennis, and then this tool just helps them. And again, I would like to mention that this is a way of generating wealth in Spain, so that we can move just into a knowledge-based society, okay? And then also I think that sustainability plays a role. As I said, I think there are plenty of research opportunities, there is plenty of work to be done, and there are new challenges every day because technology evolves so quickly that this that I'm presenting today, it's already outdated. I mean, we have now, the challenge we have is that this software, this grammar checker, was written in JavaScript, which is a language that computer scientists use, and it's already outdated. So now we have to translate that into a new system, So technology evolves so quickly that really you need to be like updated and taking care of, having a look of every advance that is done, that is provided at any time. So again, as I said, I think there are plenty of research opportunities, and if anyone wants ideas, I'll be more than happy to provide ideas for research in corpus linguistics, error analysis, speech processing, and things like that. So thank you very much.
Any questions or comments?
Thank you, Ruben, for a very clear and insightful view of technology for second language learning and teaching. You talked about Moocs, and then quickly you mentioned that Moocs were being, I think you said, questioned or something, and then you went on to.
Okay.
I'd like to know what does that mean when you talked about questions.
Yes, I just wanted to stick to the time, so that's why in the end I was just rushing. Yeah, Moocs are being questioned in the academic context, because there are things that, of course, if you offer a Mooc freely available to anyone who wants to learn something, what's the point of universities, for example? So if they are done properly, somehow they threaten current models. For example, you probably know that the University of Lancaster is a very important research center for corpus linguistics. I mean, it's like, at the moment, it's amazing things that are being done there. And they offer a very interesting MOOC on corpus linguistics, freely available. But they estimate that 2% of the people who take those MOOCs end up being their real students at the university. So the problem with MOOCs is the business model, basically. And that's what's somehow threatening this. UNED, they have like a social role to play, so they provide us with a computer room, with everything that we need. We have done this for free. I mean, this is not something that, as research. But of course, if you're using, we asked for this Empieza con el Inglés. We had published with Cambridge University Press, and we asked for permission to use something we have published with them. But this is something that is free. So what's the business model? I mean, there needs to be, you like it or not, this idea that we have of that everything is free on the internet. That's not possible. I mean, there is. So the thing is that that's what threatens MOOCs. because, I mean, they need a business model. UNED, for example, what they do is as follows. All these Moocs are for free. You just can take, finish the course, you learn, and that's fine. Then if you want a certificate, which means in Spain we're very fond of certificates. So if you want a certificate saying that you have finished, that you have completed all the activities, someone checks that you have completed all the activities, and they give you for, I don't know, but around 10 euros, they give you a certificate, which is not bad. And then if you want a completion certificate, meaning that you have really taken advantage of, you can go to an associate center, take a small test, and then they give you a certificate that costs you like 50 euros, I don't know, more or less. So I do this for free, but I understand that the university needs to somehow pay for all these resources. So that's why I think that they're starting to be questioned.
So just following up on that very quickly. So basically you talk about questioning Moocs from the point of view of sustainability and financially.
Exactly.
In terms of learning and you know, cognitive, or if you want, success in terms of blended learning, are there any comments on that? Are there? I've heard that blended learning, which I've heard, which combines the, you know, the teacher and also distance learning. Like this is ideally the best combination. Would you agree with that? I mean,
yeah, of course. I do think that you've got to pay attention to use new technologies to learn. I mean, there is no way we can. I remember my brother-in-law who says that he works in a bank, and he said, "Okay, people just come inside and they want to withdraw money because they say they don't know how to use the cash machine, but they know how to use the iPad and they're on Facebook and they know." So the idea is that we need to evolve and we need to make use of, and there is no age for that. My mom uses Facebook and she's perfectly happy with that. So the idea is that Moocs, the problem with Moocs is that of sustainability and that of quality. That's the same problem that we have on the internet. And the internet, you can have anything, but the problem is not to find something, but to know if that's good enough or not. And we have learned a lot also in the process of doing Moocs. The very first Mooc we did a few years ago, we recorded short videos. For us, it was short 8 minutes. Now we know that doesn't make any sense. A video should be maximum 3-4 minutes maximum. Right now we are preparing another Mooc. It's going to be a NUC because our research, not our research team, but our innovation research team. We have a team for everything. Our innovation research team. We found out that our students at the master's levels, the trabajo fin de master, they had no resources. So we had like a couple of research projects going on. We identified some needs, and then we developed that into a book, and it's going to be published in a few months. A book about how to write a trabajo fin de master in the area of philology in general. So we are an interdisciplinary team. We are people from different departments, people from the library and things. And we wanted to complement that. I mean, a book is no longer, itself is no longer useful for a distance learning student. So we will just complement that with some recordings and things that we will put into this book. So it's a way of complementing printed materials, we think. I think someone over there.
Thank you so much for your nice lecture.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you if there is anything about the being user-friendly of this Mooc. For example, I've seen that the explanation about everything is in English. And maybe for someone who is intermediate a student, it's a bit complex to use this. Is it different levels, for example, for different levels, is there any actually way that they use it simply, simple, and not very, complicated? For example,
you mean like Moocs to learn languages are like lower level or something? Sorry,
I mean when, for example, in low-level students, they use it simple, for example, user-friendly, more user-friendly, not so complicated, because I've seen that level is, for every level is a bit complex. For example, someone who has knowledge, enough knowledge for using everything in English is something.
One thing about Moocs is that you can do whatever you want. I mean, it offers you as many possibilities as technology offers you. So you can use it. You can design it for any level, any topic. For example, I have always liked art, and I'm taking some Moocs on art. But one of the things is that sometimes I have time to finish it, and sometimes I just forget. So I am one of those students that just quit, and no one knows why. But you can design a MOOC on anything you like, anything, any topic, any level, any target group. It's really. When I was asked to give this talk today, I was hesitating whether talking about all these projects or just about one of them. And I now think that I should have just show you the MOOCs, like more in depth, because I think that it's one of the ones that interests you the most. And going back to your question, Emma, I remember that a few years ago at conferences, MOOCs were really something really new. Something. It was thought that this was going to be like the new revolution, and now I think they're useful, but they're not going to change standards, and they're not going to change the establishment.
One more question. Is it possible that a student can use MOOC offline, or no, just online?
No, I'm sorry. That's one of the requirements, because you're not working locally, you're not working on your computer, but you're working online. But I mentioned before that our students, for example, for these 1,000 words, they use the teaching materials that we have previously published with Cambridge University Press, and we asked them to use this list of words. We tried, as one of our philosophies was to provide students with all the materials that we could provide that could be downloadable, so that they could use they could print a PDF with lists of words, so that they could rehearse them while on the ground or on the bus or whatever. So you cannot have the whole thing offline, but you can have like bits of it that you can download and use whenever you want.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ruben, for this wonderful
Thanks.
insight into new technologies. I was very interested in your grammar check. As a teacher, I think it is a tedious task marking all these writings. And you've mentioned that in order to decide what kind of errors you were considering in the grammar check, you've used the two corpus, the normative corpus and the learner corpus.
Yep.
I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on the learner corpus. What kind of corpus did you use? Not the whole process of the corpus gathering, but what kind of corpus did you gather? What variables did you use to select the kind of text? Was it Spanish students, or did you consider the native language of the student, or?
So far, so far we have just used self-compiled corpora. The thing is that Grammar Checker, as it is now, it can be used by anyone having any language, because it's in English. We just try to use simple English, as simple as possible, so that you can follow the instructions. But basically, if a Japanese speaker of English, Japanese as a first language, could use that. So we have fed this corpus with mistakes coming from Spanish speakers of English, which means that, of course, there will be many mistakes that will be shared with a Japanese speaker. But we have just concentrated on this close set of students, and we have used self-compiled corpora because we have used our tests. Our students write a test, and then we use the mistakes that we find when we while you are marking, you can identify mistakes, and then this is something that also feeds itself, which means that when someone writes something, the mistakes that are spotted are not included in our database. You can use, you can start thinking of and find a feedback and things for that. So the more you use it, the more information you get from a learner course. But we haven't used any somehow standardized corpus.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. No more questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. I think you're closing now.